Hey there guys, IRClever here, and I'm here today with a review of Valhalla Hills. Now, before I even begin, I'm going to date this video by saying the version number of the game is 1.02.01. Okay, so if you're thinking about getting the game, definitely check the version numbers because they might have added a bit more content or changed a few more things. So this game is being heralded as a game very similar to the Cultures franchise and the early Settlers games, so Settlers 2, 3 and 4, kinda with a little bit of Banished thrown into the melting pot as well. But this makes sense because Fnatic Software, the company that makes Valhalla Hills, have also worked on quite a few of the Cultures and Settlers games already. So a question I want you guys to think about is this game worth buying when there are a lot of games out there that are very similar and cheaper as well? In the same way that people were saying don't bother getting Civilization Beyond Earth because it's so similar to Civ 5 already. Ultimately, the answer to that question is up to you guys, so do bear that in mind as we go through this review. So what is Valhalla Hills all about? Now, traditionally in games like this, you will build up your forces and attack the other guy and defeat the other guy, right? That's the normal aim of the game. Valhalla Hills kinda does things a little bit differently here. You have to make your way up to the portal at the top and go through it, which kinda sounds easy, but there's a lot of obstacles in your way. So the whole reason your Vikings are fighting their way up to these portals and going through them is to gain honor. The story goes that people are making their way to the gates of Valhalla and Odin is just not impressed. He's not impressed by these guys at all. So he sends them down to the Valhalla Hills for them to get a lot more honorable so they can enter Valhalla and dine at Odin's dinner table. So when you request a new person, they will actually drop from the sky and then be available to you. Which strangely enough answers the question of where do people come from? Like, in Cultures, you would directly tell people to get married and then have a child, and then the stork would deliver the baby down the chimney. Or in Settlers, you would finally hammer the last plank into the lodge residence and suddenly the door would open and 50 men would stream out of there. You've got no idea where they came from. So people dropping from the sky actually makes sense. I just thought that was a nice little feature there. So before we look at the different buildings and the different production chains available, I just want to preface it with this kind of personal attachment to the Vikings that you have. Now this is just a strange aspect to the game that I'm actually kind of struggling to explain. So during the gameplay I get this overwhelming sense of why should I give a damn about this individual, okay? But it can't be ignored because the whole point of the game is to get as many characters as you can, enough honor to enter the gates of Valhalla. So in that regard, it is very personal. It creates this kind of clash of being too personal, but then too distant at the same time. It's very strange. Let me give you some examples. So you can change the name of each Viking. But to what end? Like, what's the point in changing their name? Maybe just to roleplay a little bit. The only time I ever used it is just to give them all a number to keep track of them. And you can select individuals and you can follow them and see the workplace. But what's the reason? You can't change what they're doing, so it's purely utilitarian, purely just to see if the cogs of the greater machine are working. Because there's no way for you to control that person. In Valhalla Hills, you cannot individually click a person and send them where to go. All of the professions are automatically assigned as well. So if you want a person to do a profession that might get a little bit more honor, it's going to be very difficult to change their profession. Now on the subject of honor, it stacks per game as well, so every level they play, they'll get more and more honor until they reach a certain threshold, and then they'll be allowed into the gates of Valhalla. And I have caught myself tracking a person as well, looking at the amount of honor they've got and seeing how close they are to reaching that threshold. So there is that personal touch to it again. I think at the end though, it all boils down to death. Doesn't everything, but it all boils down to that particular character dying. Now, I mentioned earlier there is a limited number of requests you can do, so you might start off a level with, say, a maximum of 85 requests. Now, if you max that out and someone dies, there's no way of replacing them, so now your maximum village size is 84, and so on and so on. So these Viking lives do matter. Hashtag Viking lives matter. So you've got to gear up these guys really well. They're more like a SWAT team than the cannon fodder type that you'd have in Settlers. So, for example, in Valhalla Hills, you get a message for each individual death, whether they are a military or a civilian. Now, I just cannot imagine that in Settlers. You would get spammed to death with the amount of people that die in there. So there is that personal touch again. So finally, guys, I think it all boils down to whether the Vikings respawn or if there's like a permadeath if they do not come back. Of course, respawning, in my eyes, would be the best way. If there is a permadeath, then people are going to be oversensitive and overly cautious with their people. Of course, you've worked so hard to get all that honour, and if they're not coming back, that's going to be a real bummer. So I did a little bit of experimenting, guys. I checked this out. Turns out your Vikings do come back, but not for that level. They'll come back with the honour intact in the level after that. So that's perfect. That's exactly what we want to see. So let's look at some of the buildings available and some of the production chains you can create as well. Now, to begin with, every profession needs a building, which is quite interesting. Unlike cultures where you could have an extractor straight away, chopping trees or getting clay, or in Settlers where you could have a geologist looking for resources. No, every profession in Valhalla Hills needs a building. Now, some buildings can be moved, and that's actually quite vital to the game, the ability to move these buildings, because as I mentioned earlier, you can't individually move your Vikings around. You can't command them on a one-by-one basis. So in order to command your troops, you have to move around the camp that they're allocated to. Now, as the name suggests, while you're building in the Valhalla Hills, you're going to come across quite a few steep slopes and uneven terrain. And I think one of the nice features about building in this game is their use of pedestals. So instead of having a load of diggers level it out, they will just add this support structure underneath the main building that you want, and it will just cost a few more resources. It scales quite nicely as well, so the steeper of a slope you want to build on, the more expensive the pedestals are going to be. It just works really well, and it's perfectly suited for a game like this. So let's look at some of the production chains. Now, these are pretty simple, really, pretty standard. There's the odd unique building out there that, as far as I can tell, is unique to Valhalla Hills, but for the most part, there's nothing out of the ordinary. So the most simple production chain is the construction side of things. So you'll start off with a woodcutter, which needs a simple axe and can create logs. And there's also the quarry, which needs a hammer and can produce stone fragments. Now, these two resources are pretty much going to sort you out for the beginning of the game at least. But if you want to start getting into slightly more complex buildings, you're going to need to refine these resources a little bit more. So the logs can be taken to a sawmill, which needs an axe again and can produce planks. The stone fragments can be taken to a stonemason, which once again needs a hammer and can produce these stone bricks. Now that is the entire construction production chain, and you know what, I'm happy with that. I think sometimes these kind of games can go too detailed, too in-depth about things, and it kind of ruins the game. This is nice. It's just slightly more depth than, say, Settlers at least. So if that was a very simple production chain, let's look at the most complex one there is, which is for manufacturing food. So we start off with three primary buildings for producing food. The first of which is the fishing lodge, which can get started straight away. Your Vikings can start eating the fish as soon as they've been caught, really. There's also the hunter, which can, once again, start producing food pretty much straight away. But just keep your eye on that guy, because sometimes he can bite off more than he can chew and gets himself killed. Now finally, and probably most importantly, there's the wheat farm, which of course produces wheat. The wheat can be taken to either the mill or the animal breeder. Now at the animal breeder, they'll also take water from a well and start producing goats that the hunter can prey on later, once he's decimated the native population of animals at least. The remaining wheat, however, then goes to the mill, which is then converted into flour and then taken to the bakery to be baked into bread, and the villagers can eat bread straight away. Now, the bread, the meat, and the fish can all be taken one step further to the kitchen, and the kitchen will produce some nice tasty sandwiches for your Vikings. Now, at the moment, the combined nutritional value is less than the sum of its parts, so I don't really see the point in taking things to the kitchen. So unless there's some kind of reason that I've not picked up on or not realised, the kitchen is kind of useless at the moment. So guys, if I've convinced you to buy this game, just hang on for a minute, because there are some major problems with this game that do need to be addressed. Now, I've left this bit to the end of the video in the hopes that the problems will be fixed, and then like this section will be slightly less relevant. Now, once again, that build number is 1.02.01. That's the one I'm reviewing at the moment. So let's start by looking at some of these problems. So first off, the AI kind of sometimes does some really stupid things. So for example, sometimes a Viking will stray too far, whether they're a woodcutter looking for trees or a quarryman looking for stones. They'll stray too far and come across an enemy, and the enemy will then go to attack them. And they will fight back, you know, maybe it's the honourable thing to do, but they'll fight back and lose a whole load of health. And now, if they don't die straight away, they usually run off and then forget all about it and carry on with the job again, stray too far once again, and then that enemy will attack them again. And that cycle continues until they die, really. What would be nice there is, like in Settlers, how you could have a working area, or I think what would work nicely in Valhalla Hills is like an exclusion zone, like an area where obviously you don't go because there's enemies there that the player can set themselves. That would be nice to see. But to be honest, I'm sure that's quite an easy fix actually. There's probably a really simple way to sort that out. The other problem I have with Valhalla Hills seems a lot more ingrained into the fabric of the game and might be a lot harder to fix. I guess we'll have to wait and see. So, you have to make your way up to the portals, right? But the best tactic that is glaringly obvious is to just bum rush the portal as quick as possible. So, the second you start the game, make troops, run up to the portal. And you can get through quite a lot of the game just rushing to the portal as quickly as possible. And it's a shame because there's all these different buildings and all these production chains that you can build, but they're just not necessary. You could just rush up to the portal as quick as possible and move on to the next level. Now, even if you are playing the game for its content, so you decide not to rush up as quickly as possible and to go for the production chains, you've still got to face the dome dwarfs, which will spawn randomly throughout the game and start setting up camp and expanding. You have to bum rush those guys. You cannot let those expand. Once again, because every troop you lose reduces the maximum size of the village, you have to shut those guys down straight away and just not let them expand at all. So even if you're playing for the content, you still have to rush down the dome dwarfs. It's a shame because it really feels like the mechanics of the game are designed in such a way that it encourages you to miss out on quite a lot of the game's content. And finally, I think once you make your way up to the portal and open it and go through it, whether you've made a really nice town or whether you've just rushed up there as quick as possible, there's no real sense of accomplishment. Like, you open the portal, go through it, and it's like, where's the sense of achievement? What's the purpose? You know, it's just like, well done, next level. I think there's just something missing at the moment, because just completing the level and instantly moving on to the next one, I don't know, it just feels like a grind. It really does feel like a grind. You've got to grind these guys 100,000 honor to get into Valhalla. That's the game. It just needs something to make it like a pat on the back, like, well done, this is how you did. Maybe like a stats menu when you complete a game in Settlers 3 and 4. There's like, hey, this is how many buildings you've produced, this is the amount of combat you won. Something, just something it needs. It's so infuriating. It's like, come on, I really want to like this game. It's a nice game, but there's just these problems with it that I really want to have fixed so I can enjoy it to its fullest potential, you know? So that's it, guys. That's my review of Valhalla Hills. I hope you found it nice and informative. If you enjoyed it, feel free to hit that like button. Also, you can subscribe if you feel like I've deserved it as well. So thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next time.